Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? Hope it's fantastic. This stool is way too low. I feel like a little kid right now. This is not my normal stool. It is over here pretending to be a sanding cart right now. So whatever, we're sitting lower today. I feel you guys are in a position of power because the camera is actually higher than my eye level right now. Hopefully I've got the audio. Friday, so you know all that work I put into years ago to get this audio setup dialed in so that we'd have clean audio. The process of tearing it down and moving it and putting it back in place means that I've messed with the knobs somehow. So Friday's audio was terrible. It was peaking. I was hitting peaks constantly, and it sounded atrocious. So I really apologize for that. Hopefully, I have fixed that problem, and it's not crazy loud right now. But it was definitely crazy loud on Friday. Okay, this is the top for the new desk, and it's okay. It's just okay. So I decided to make the top out of pine. This is just regular old pine. It's not Douglas fir. Unfortunately, I didn't have any Douglas fir 1x material on hand. So I just decided to use some pine and stain it. It's got one coat of Minwax pecan, golden pecan. I think I'm going to put a second coat on there just to even it out a little bit and maybe darken it up slightly. I did pick a piece of wood. You probably can't see it on camera, and I don't think I'm going to be able to show it to you, that has some dark, like that pink banding, which is kind of the color of Douglas fir. So I'm thinking that it'll look okay once it's all assembled, but that's not here or there. I picked out a board that has no knotholes. So if we can do this, you can see the top of the desk is perfectly clear. So that worked out well. Real nice, clean desktop. It's gonna be fantastic. Pine is not resilient. It's very easy to dent. Like I could probably drop this remote on it and it would dent it. So it's not a great work surface. But for the most part, this will be covered by two mice and two mice pads, coffee cup, phone stand. Like there's not a lot of room here to ding it up, except for these sides. So, this weekend, I wanted to try something different. Something that I've always struggled with, but again, I've been taking my time on this project, and I thought, okay, let's do a technique that scares me. And so I decided to make a miter box. If you don't know what that is, imagine a board. Imagine this is the board. I mean, this is literally part of the board. This is part of the original top. You take that board and you cut it at a 45. And then you take the piece that came off of that board and you cut the opposite 45. And so now you can fold this up and you have a 90-degree corner. And if you're looking at it, from the side or from the top, the grain follows and flows down around the sides, which is nice. I mean, that's neat, but that's not why I did it. What I wanted to do was I put the 3/4 inch top on the desk and it looked goofy. It was way too thin because of the chunkiness of the base. So I decided I was going to mimic thickness by adding this trim piece. Here's the thing, when you're doing that, pine, particularly this is probably just spruce or white pine, it moves a good bit. It's been in my basement for a couple of years now, so it's not wet, which means it's probably done the most shrinking that it's going to do. But it will absorb a good bit of moisture during the summer, and it'll move. So if I were to cap this end with just a piece of trim like I would do on like a piece of plywood, it would eventually fail. So the nice thing about doing this mitered edge is the grain is running in the same direction, which means that this edge and this top will expand and contract at the same rate. So I don't have to worry about it tearing itself apart. And it looks cool. And it's difficult. Here's the thing that's difficult about it. In the past, I have done this with hardwoods that I have processed myself, meaning that they come thick, like an inch, really 15/16, and I have machined it down to whatever the thickness is I want, using the rudimentary setups that I have. I don't have a face jointer, so my jointer is only 4 inches. I can't flatten the face of a board with that. So all I have is a planer, and what I would do is what's called skip planing, which would be taking off just the tiniest amount. Because if you take off too much, the planer will force the board flat as it's feeding. But if you skip plane, it'll just kind of graze the high spots. It takes a long time. You barely move the knob, put the board through, barely move the knob, and you just keep working up from both sides. And in the end, you come out with a board that's close to parallel. But in reality, it's not. It's going to have some waves and some whatever. So on a board this long, this top is 39 inches. When you've got that blade set at 45 degrees and you're feeding this to the table, if this edge is not held tight to the table and it's got a hump in it or you know, a low spot in it, that miter is also going to have a bulge or a divot. And then when you try to join the two together, it looks terrible. So I made this top. This was two 1x12s. I cut into 5.5-inch strips to remove some of the pin center and also get them lay a little flatter. That allowed me to get a beautiful glue seam. You can't see the glue seams very much at all. And then it also allowed me to put those two pieces through the joint or through the planer and skip plane it down and then join it all together. So I have relatively, probably the best flatness that I've ever had in a panel glue up to try this technique on. So I set up the saw blade and I went for it. This process involves cutting off this long piece first, cutting off these middle pieces, or these end pieces, and then trimming this long piece along with these middle pieces to the right length. And so that means you end up with 4 pieces. So this top, this front piece, I'll show this all to you in pictures, these two sides, and then you can fold it all on itself. I really wish that I'd taken a video of this, because what I ended up doing was using biscuits, and I didn't take pictures of the biscuit cuts, but I'm going to attempt to show you this. Hopefully you're seeing some video of the underside of this. I marked out 4 biscuits here, 3 here, and so the biscuits are just to help keep everything aligned and straight. And I dry fit it, and it looked phenomenal. This corner was absolutely perfect, crisp, just unbelievably great. And I was so excited. I texted Malia, I texted my friend and said, dude, I did it. I pulled this thing off. And then it went time to glue it. And everything went sideways. And so what I did, to kind of illustrate, let's do a little live demo. If you look at this, you can see there is the 3/4 inch normal piece. But up here, it looks thick, nice and thick. So 3 sides, this is the front and the 2 sides. This is where I'm sitting. It doesn't need to be thick back here. I laid this down on some clamps, and the plan was to put these 2 end caps on and then put this big piece on. So I started over here. Actually, I glued all the biscuits in the base, and then I started spreading glue here, put this piece on, spread glue here, put this piece on. Maybe it was the other way around. Then tried to put this piece on. And the problem was this end was pushed forward about 1/8 of an inch, or more like 3/32. So a little heavier than a 1/16. It was pushed forward, which meant that it shoved this corner out and down. It didn't meet up to the top. So this whole corner had huge gaps. Because I was fighting, the reason was I used Tight Bond 2. So by the time I tried to fix it, it was already set. I couldn't pull it apart. It was just, I had to live with whatever the heck was going to happen at that point. So I continued trying to get the rest as tight as I could. I ended up with gaps all across the front, a tiny gap on this side. there was gaps, and there was nothing I could do, and it was so freaking disheartening because I had such an amazing feeling moment when it all clicked, and I was like, oh my god, this thing's going to be perfect. And now I have these gaps, and so I did the glue and sanding trick, which is to just kind of get some glue, force it in the gap, and then sand, and that will kind of fill in. So there's no visible holes anymore, but there are lines. The glue won't take stain and finish like everything else. It'll look obvious if you get close and look. But from across the room, for a pine work surface, it's going to be great. But it's just one of those... Past me probably would have done it without the dry fit, because I've always found that the second time I attempt something, I do worse. The first time is always the best time. The second time, I always do worse. And I should have just gone for it. I mean, I also had the thought before starting, should I use Titebond 3? Because it has a much longer open time, which means I could have moved the pieces around easier. Should I have used epoxy? I had these thoughts before doing it, and I decided, nah, Titebond 2 is fine. It's got an open time of like 5 to 10 minutes. I'll be okay. I can get this thing together in that amount of time. Works out I couldn't, and I ended up kind of screwing it up. I think it's serviceable right now, and hopefully it'll stay together, not fall apart. That's the main concern. My biggest concern, though, is that it doesn't look anything like the rest of the disc, even with the stain on it. So I am going to try a second coat. I've never done 2 coats with a Minwax product, but I did a very, very light. I did not flood coat this. I did a super, super light, like dip the rag and just buff it in, kind of like I would do with the finishing oil that I'm going to use. So hopefully a second coat will get it a little closer. And if it's not perfect, that's fine. Again, it's just something for my living room for temporary use. But what a learning experience. It was a fun weekend. And then, on top of this, we played a lot of Earth and hung out with the kids and just kind of did general nerdy stuff. What'd you get up to? Anything exciting? I do have some topics to talk about this week, which is exciting. I haven't had topics for a while. So if you have anything you want to hear about, let me know in the comments. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends with wonderful people. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know sounds smart is rife. It is an adjective meaning prevalent, abundant, and abounding. The hotel was rife with tourists, so we quickly went upstairs to the penthouse. Rife. R-I-F-E. Yep, that is another one of those. I don't think this is an uncommon word. I think people say rife all the time, right? Am I crazy?